collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambos.
Coming up on the programme this week, we'll hear about help for dementia sufferers and their carers.
Booklets describing activities which would be suitable for use by carers looking after elderly people, especially the elderly suffering from Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
The Cyprus Rally breaks new ground to include a stage in the Turkish Cypriot areas.
This Friday afternoon, the super special stage, it has been very carefully designed so that it offers a tremendous spectacle to viewers, that it provides security for drivers and spectators.
We'll talk to the head of the UNHCR about managing diversity in refugee integration in Cyprus.
There is a lack of any meaningful dialogue on issues like this. There isn't a willingness even to engage in serious debates so that we can help in shaping their strategies and policies.
And we'll hear about the significance of oil in the Middle East and Iraq.
On ISIS, first of all, because it depends on mobility and it needs its own diesel and it can't import it or buy it very readily, it has to have an oil industry. So first and foremost, beyond money, it needs an oil industry to conduct its military operations and some production.
Our first topic on the programme this week is dementia and Alzheimer's disease. My first guest is a retired maths teacher who's worked in the field and come up with a couple of downloadable booklets to help both the carers and sufferers of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Gareth Rowlands, thanks for joining us on the Cyprus News Digest. Now, first of all, I think we'd say that not as much money as we might like is going into research into these issues, and it's on the increase. More and more people are being affected. Can you tell us a bit about the booklets that you've uploaded onto your website and that I think can be downloaded for free?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Not long ago, I devised a website called Battle Dementia, and from that website it is possible to download 2 booklets, which are booklets describing activities which would be suitable for use by carers looking after elderly people, especially the elderly suffering from Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Those activities in the booklets can be adapted, they can be translated, they can be changed to suit the need of each particular patient who would find them interesting and in turn make the life of the carer and the patient much better by using them.
Right, you had, I think, representatives at the meeting from the Cyprus Alzheimer's Association. What was their reaction to what you had to say?
Yes, we had Maria Seliari, who is the secretary of the Cyprus Alzheimer's Association, and during the presentation at the Four Seasons Hotel, she was very, very impressed and pleased to receive the booklets, which she said she was going to be able to use at the various daycare centres and possibly residential homes and homes in themselves in Cyprus.
You were working, I think, yourself in a residential home in the UK when all of these things came together to battle dementia.co.uk. What do you see as the biggest problems, both that sufferers of Alzheimer's and dementia and particularly the carers of those people, what are the big issues for them?
I think the main issue is, it's quite a straightforward issue. If the elderly suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia are just left to do nothing or very little, then of course they are not going to be mentally or physically active. And being mentally and physically active makes them feel themselves much better, and in turn makes the life of the carer a much happier one. There are three words which I consider when I am using the activities, and it is hope, help, and happiness, both for the carers and also the patients.
And I'm presuming that really brain gym is what I call it, but we do tend to look after the physical aspects of our bodies and sometimes neglect the mind. Are there exercises in your booklets of things that can help sufferers to remember more?
Yes, you're absolutely right. The activities help the patient to reminisce and to remember some things that they did in the past, and this makes them feel happier. And the activities are, in fact, both mental activities and also physical activities, especially dancing and moving, so that both the mind and body is exercised, sometimes at the same time.
It all sounds wonderful, and I'm sure a lot of people will be visiting battledementia.co.uk to get the free downloads. Great that you're not charging for them, and hopefully it goes some way to helping both the sufferers and their carers to live a more fulfilling life. That's Gareth Rowlands from battledementia.co.uk.
Listen online to the Cyprus News Digest on YouTube or at cyprusmail.libsyn.com. The latest program is uploaded every Friday, and if you missed one, you can catch up there.
The Cyprus Rally is probably Cyprus' biggest international sporting event. It takes place each year. Now, it no longer counts for the World Rally Championship, but it is a counter for both the European Rally Championship and the Middle East Rally Championship. And this year, fans in Nicosia are going to get their fill. There's a super special stage that for the first time is going to include areas in the Turkish Cypriot part of Nicosia. When the rally was launched, I spoke to the chairman of the Cyprus Automobile Association, Antonis Michailidis, who's very excited because this year it really is going to be a big one.
This year is a far more important event because it's a combination of two international rallies, the European Rally Championship and the Middle East. So the importance and the promotion that the event will get through the international media and so on will be enormous, and that of course is in the benefit of the hosting town, and this was the aim. We feel that Nicosia has been deprived for many years of such promotion on international level, and therefore we opted to concentrate the headquarters and the event in Nicosia and in the surrounding areas.
It also is very interesting that you've decided, and I suppose it's because it's Nicosia that you were able to include the occupied areas. Do tell us about the super special stage that starts the rally off and will be running both through the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot areas of Nicosia.
Yes, that is true. We decided to propose this idea to the Turkish side, following an agreement from our side of the preconditions that should govern this venture. And the preconditions are very simple and straightforward. It's the implementation of the stipulations of the International Sporting Code of the FIA. If one looks at those stipulations, he gets a clear picture as to what the rules of such a game would be. Secondly, it's been recognized by the other side, the Turkish side, that the exclusive organizer of this event and of this particular special stage cannot be anybody else but the official representative of the FIA in Cyprus, that is to say the Cyprus Automobile Association.
OK, so you've got the cars going to be driving in both the areas of Nicosia. I'm sure particularly because people do love having motorsport on their doorstep, not having to travel out maybe to some of the special stages out of town. Where can they find out how to find the best viewing positions when this takes place on the Friday, I think it is?
Yes, it's Friday afternoon, the super special stage. It has been very carefully designed so that it offers a tremendous spectacle to viewers, that it provides security for drivers and spectators. The special stage will be marshalled by official marshals of the Cyprus Automobile Association. Turkish Cypriots will join the teams of the marshals following the securing of a license, of the appropriate license as depicted by the sporting code stipulations. The drivers also will have to be holders of the international driving license, be it Greek or Turkish Cypriots.
And you do have Turkish Cypriot drivers taking part?
Yes, 12 crews will take part following the acquisition of the appropriate driving license from the CAA.
So where can people go and see the stage?
Well, the route will be published so that it can be seen from media, the newspapers, and I hope on sporting programs of television, so that people will be well informed in advance as to where the best areas of viewing would be. There are quite a few areas that have been allocated specifically for viewing.
And the CAA website, presumably, or the Rally website?
Yes, will show the exact route that this stage will follow.
The chairman of the Cyprus Automobile Association, Antonis Michailidis. Now, when I spoke to him, the map of the super special stage hadn't actually been published. It has now, and rather strangely, the official map from the rally organisers ends where the cars enter the Turkish area and comes back again when they finish their little bit round there. Rather strange. You'd have thought that since it was billed as a rally bringing both sides in Cyprus together, that the organisers would have printed the whole of the super special stage.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambos.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Last week at the European Union House in Nicosia, there was a public discussion entitled Refugee Integration in Cyprus, Managing Diversity. The place was packed out, and one of the keynote speakers was the head of the UNHCR in Cyprus, Damtu Desalange. Damtu, thanks once again for joining us. It was a very forceful discussion, one might say, with standing room only, and a lot of feedback to the different people who spoke. How would you say that the whole day went in terms of what can come out of it?
I was really impressed by the interest of so many people in this subject matter, and it shows that not just the refugees and refugee assisting NGOs and UNHCR is keen to see more integration of refugees. But the authorities also would like to see some change because they recognize that there are deficiencies, there are gaps. What did I observe over the course of last 5-6 hours? Yeah, lots of emotions from both sides. There is quite a degree of polarization, if you like. There is a sense that the refugees keep on demanding things and rights and more rights because integration is seen by some as a luxury, as something the state cannot really afford, especially now during economic difficulties.
Which is a little strange because in a lot of other countries, particularly in Northern Europe, and I think you had speakers from Sweden, for example, the Swedish ambassador, they have policies in place which absorb migrants into society as part of their economic growth strategy and as part of the cultural diversity which they recognise can enrich their society. What is it, do you think, about... Cyprus may not be alone in this, I think, in the southern Mediterranean. What is it that makes us take an almost diametrically opposed view?
Well, there are differing asylum cultures, if you like, within the EU. Countries that have been receiving refugees for many years know what needs to be done, have put in place functioning systems and structures. And more importantly, they have seen the benefits of receiving refugees.
Which is
benefits to their own economies and cultures and development.
Well, we heard about good practice and the fact that the benefits have been shown when these practices are put into place makes it all the more extraordinary that countries that are facing problems actually with migration because they're not using the best practices seem to be so slow in changing what they do and how they do it so that everybody can benefit.
Exactly. Again, the difficulty here is that there is a lack of any meaningful dialogue on issues like this. There isn't a willingness even to engage in serious debates so that we can help in shaping their strategies and policies, bring in best practices indeed from other countries, not just from Europe, but also from Canada, from Australia, from the traditional immigration countries that have absorbed over the years hundreds of thousands of immigrants and integrated them fully. But we are not there yet.
We're certainly not, and every time we do hear representatives of some of the government agencies here, with a couple of notable exceptions, there does again seem to be this view that's been in vogue, if you like, in Cyprus for probably the last 20 or 30 years, and there doesn't seem to be any movement on it at all. I mean, are you looking forward to the possibility that sooner rather than later the agencies in the government that are dealing with these issues will start to look at best practice elsewhere, think out of the box and actually change the way we do things in Cyprus?
Well, it will take some time, it will take some serious reforms because it's difficult to address today's problems within today's EU and European realities with systems and structures put in place many years ago, therefore that are not responsive, said for a number of reasons to the issues we are dealing with. There is insufficient human resources in many of the departments dealing with refugee asylum matters. And then at the political level, there is a sense that because we are close to hotspots, because we are, at the front line of migration, if we do more will come. This is something shared by many countries, especially in Southern Europe. It's not just Cyprus. So doing the right thing may bring you troubles, and therefore let's keep it as it is, in order to ensure that there is no more pressure, increasing migration pressure on us.
That makes it sound as if you don't think the changes are going to be made.
I don't know. I don't know. It's a difficult environment right now from many perspectives. Like I say, this is the economy, this is a Cyprus problem, there is negotiations going on, and there are many other factors as well. But I'm hopeful because without that, I wouldn't be able to do my job.
That's the head of the UNHCR, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in Cyprus, Damciu Desalange.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
You don't open a newspaper, listen to a TV or radio show these days without the chance of the word ISIS appearing somewhere. My next guest on the Cyprus News Digest is Raffi Koukal. He is an expert in energy, particularly apropos of the Middle East region, and he's a reporter for the Energy Intelligence Group. Raffi, you've just been on a trip in the area. What were you doing, actually?
Well, I went first of all to southeast Turkey, where I visited the ports where Kurdish oil is being exported from. There's a big dispute between the Kurds and Baghdad over the right to export oil and control of Kurdish oil fields, and I think on that hinges actually whether Iraq stays together or not. I also visited some of the Syrian rebels in southeast Turkey, and they have a nascent, they're very weak, moderate rebel group, so they've kind of lost the on-the-ground power, but my thinking is that with the West struggling to find alternatives and people to support, they could get an injection of support from the US coming up, and they have an oil minister, so I spoke to them, and then I went into Iraq and I went to visit the various officials and sources there, both in Kurdistan and in Kirkuk, which is a northern Iraqi town, majority Kurdish, but actually falls under Baghdad or central Iraqi government control.
This business of the oil and who has which oil fields is obviously a very thorny one, and presumably there has to be some sort of an agreement between them at some point. But the big question probably, I think, is who's buying the oil that is, for example, disputed Kurdish oil, and more importantly, who's buying the oil that ISIS is selling and funding its programme with from the oil fields that it has captured?
Right, on the Kurdish side, they're struggling to sell their oil because there's a legal case against them. So a lot's going to Israel, and Israel does not have any relations with the government of Iraq. So any sort of legal case kind of loses its power. On ISIS, there's several points to make on this group. First of all, because it depends on mobility, and it needs its own diesel, and it can't import it or buy it very readily, it has to have an oil industry. So first and foremost, beyond money, it needs an oil industry to conduct its military operations and some production. Where it's selling it subcontracts a lot of it to the private sector in Syria and takes a tax in Syria. In Iraq, similarly, that's happened. I think it's evolved very much through the conflict. So for the first month and a half, a lot of oil was going through Kurdish areas, and pretty much as usual. But this is a long-standing smuggling route. It's been going on for almost a decade now. And then, of course, ISIS and the Kurds started fighting, or real hostilities started fighting between the two, and the Kurds shut down this route. I personally think that ISIS is starting to feel a little bit of a pain on the oil front. It's lost some oil fields. Certainly in Iraq, I believe its mobility has been cut down. It's getting hit from the air. Some of its refineries haven't been able to produce. These are very small refineries. And the other point that's not really been picked up by people is how much it depends on plunder. So a lot of these oil fields, if you look at how much they produced pre-war, it's quite a big number. At one point, I think they controlled 150,000 barrels a day, times $100. You work that out. That's a lot of money. But never at any point did they actually produce that. In Syria, the fields have been suffering from neglect through 3 years of war, this lack of spare parts, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot less. But what they did do when they went into Iraq is they hit pipelines, hit storage tanks, and they took a lot of oil from there, possibly as much as they've taken from oil fields per se or produced per se.
But is there no sort of paper trail, if you like, that shows who has been buying this oil? Because that basically is funding ISIS.
It is, and quite frankly, there's not. The initial Kurdish route, I'll tell you, it goes through the crude goes to Kurdistan. It goes to these tea kettle refineries. You drive along roads in Kurdistan. You see these little installations that they do between 50 and 500 barrels a day. They sell like bad quality diesel, and there's a massive, long-standing route, mainly done by Iranian truckers, not so much to Iran, but it goes to Afghanistan, to Armenia, some goes to Bandar Abbas. This is a huge kind of network which there's absolutely no visibility towards. On the Turkish side, it's coming out basically at two places. One, a place called Tel Abyad, which is northeast of Aleppo in the north of Syria, and one sort of west of Aleppo. And there's obvious connections with Turkish smuggling routes. The Turks have come under a lot of criticism, but first of all, one has to remember they've got like 49 members of their consul being held hostage by ISIS. So you can see that their hands are somewhat tied. I mean, there's one thing having one of your nationals being beheaded in public. When you've got 49, you've got to be careful how you operate. But they have been taking some action against the smuggling. Clearly not enough, but they've got an explosive situation down there in the southeast of the Turks, and managing it is going to be a very big challenge. You can argue that it's a challenge very much of their own making, because at the beginning they did, certainly for a long time, they had a lot of arms, a lot of personnel, a lot of aid go through those borders, and they woke up to the threat far too late.
What about the ships that are carrying some of this oil? Because you haven't got a pipeline going from the areas you've mentioned to Israel, and you did say earlier that Israel...
That's the Kurdish crude. That's the Kurdish crude. I mean, there's a completely different level of illegality involved here. I mean, it depends where you stand on the Kurd-Baghdad dispute. But yes, with the Kurdish oil, there's strong... that we have an idea where it's gone. Largely, what has sold into Israel. One's cargo has gone into Hungary, into Mole. One has gone quite mysteriously disappeared off the coast of Singapore, but they do these ship-to-ship transfers and they switch off their transponders. But I think there are two separate issues. One is the Kurdish Baghdad issue, which is very important for the way Iraq sorts itself out, because it's essentially who controls oil, controls the state, and one can argue that if full control of Kurdish control came over their oil sector, they're effectively independent. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's really not for me to suggest. I would say that however it's managed, it should be negotiated, and the current dispute has not been healthy for either side.
And the current situation anyway in Iraq and in parts of Syria are not conducive to negotiations of any sort, are there? I mean, where do you see this all going?
Well, on the Kurds, you'd have thought that they could possibly have shelved their dispute, since they're both in a fight against ISIS, and clearly this doesn't help it. What you find, it's not just in the oil. There was a point when Iraqi joint forces retook the Mosul dam, and there was almost a shooting fight between the Kurdish Peshmerga and the Iraqi federal forces over who'd stick their flag up. That's the kind of situation where ISIS is probably laughing, isn't it? So I'd have thought that they could have done more to park this dispute, and it's hurting both sides. The Kurds are not getting their 17% budgetary entitlement from central government, that people haven't had their salaries paid. There's real hardship, and from Baghdad's side, we've seen over the last couple of years, because of the conflict, basic political instability in northern Iraq, all of northern Iraq, not just there, has slowly deteriorated. And we've clearly got a part of Iraq that wants to leave, or could well leave, and that has lots of implications for other parts of Iraq.
Oh gosh,
it's going to have a knock-on effect.
It's going to go on probably for quite some time, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah. So on the ISIS oil, that's a very different kettle of fish, and that's where we don't have a lot of visibility. It's a lot smaller scale. With the ISIS oil in terms of exports, It's gone up and down. I think at one point we were talking about 40,000 barrels tops, but on the whole, I would say in terms of exports and smuggling, I'd be surprised if it was above 15,000. So it is a very important source of finance, yes, but it's a lot of money. We don't know how much. Estimates vary from like $1 to $3 million a day, but it's a lot of money for a terrorist group, but not so much for a state. The Kurdish side we're talking about much bigger volumes. And
pleasure talking to you, Raffi. Thanks for shedding some light on a very dark situation. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.